before the movie started, I don't know if any of you recognize Ethan as the main character in the movie.
Oh, wow.
It looks a little different, doesn't he?
A little different when you're not a.
That's right, that's right.
Am I down over this way, or I don't know if we need another mic?
We're all vaccinated. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I guess I'm gonna start off a question for the three of you related to the making of the film. As mostly a Jewish audience that is here today, what is it that exactly that you want the audience to take away from this film?
That is a lovely question. So I think, to be succinct and get to the heart of it, we all know that Jews are one of the primary targets of white supremacy. They're one of the primary victims of white supremacy. And although that is true, we live in a country where the type of messaging you see in the film can affect anyone. And especially for people that look like me, that means that sometimes even as Jews, we can do things to uphold white supremacy and propagate these harmful ideas. Nothing you saw in the film was created. We either took it from real life or from my own formerly more racist thinking that I used to have as a person. So those scenes in The Office where he's talking about the fast twitch muscle fibers, that was something someone taught me when I was a kid and I thought was true for a long time. So I just think for, obviously primarily Ashkenazi audiences, it's important that we understand how we might be adding fuel to the fire, even if we are victims of the violence.
Joyce, I know that you had a question. Do we have another mic up there for Joyce?
Paul's killed it.
Tell me about your research that you did before you did your script for this.
Right.
Yeah, so thank you, Joyce. That's a great question. We did a lot of research. We actually, to take a sidestep from your question for a moment, Joyce, we were inspired to make the movie because when the Poway synagogue shooting happened here, we were just a little ways away in Los Angeles showing another film. And we got lucky enough to win a prize with that one that enabled us to make another one. And I remember Ethan was sitting on the hotel bed at the time and with his head in his hands and said, I have to make a movie about hate. And so we set off on research. That was our first chunk before we ever wrote a word. We dove into very extensive research, and actually the ADL's resources were a primary source for us, as well as some novels whose titles I won't share with you so as not to perpetuate their dissemination, that have been cornerstones of this great replacement conspiracy theory for decades, specifically here in the United States. So yeah, we did intensive research and learned so much, but Tammy's much more of an expert.
Can I add just one point on that?
Yeah.
Obviously, most of what happens in the digital realm on the internet. And as part of the film, I created many fake accounts on all of these white supremacist platforms, and I spent weeks collecting the memes that they shared with each other, looking at the lingo that they shared with each other, and all the coded language that they use. And it is, as I'm sure Tammy can tell you, a massive lexicon of insanity.
Which actually ties into which ties into what we're talking about before in terms of like keeping ourselves accountable and keeping our own communities accountable in terms of this language that sneaks itself into our mainstream culture, that, you know, words that people who would not consider themselves to be racist or to be anti-Semitic will use without even realizing. You know, Zionist and globalist, these words get thrown around so easily. And that was a big part of our research, as well as learning how mainstream these ideas have become and how baked into our everyday culture they've become. And so it's important to stay constantly vigilant and aware of how we're using words that we may not even realize we're using.
Okay. And I want to bring Tammy into the mix here. realizing what ADL has been doing for too many years in regards to hate and extremism, if you could update us of what's happening now.
Thank you, Fran. So you know that ADL has been at this since 1913, and it has just morphed over different platforms. And right now we're seeing it a lot in the digital space. I cannot tell you how real this is. I mean, this is the life at ADL every single day. So this is not just a fringe thing that people do, you know, this is out there. We have a center on extremism that I think these folks tapped into to get a lot of information. We also have a center on technology and society, which is really trying to dig into transparency of some of these social media platforms. There's going to be a bill coming out in California at the next legislative session around transparency in social media that we're going to be advocating for. So we are looking into this, tracking it, sharing it with law enforcement every single day. And I'm going to just take a point of privilege and tack on to what my colleagues here were saying, which is that the responsibility for each of us to call out hate within our own groups. So if you are a Republican and you see this coming from your friends and family, you need to call it out. If you're a Democrat and you're seeing this on platforms, in social media, in groups of your friends and family, we have to be courageous in calling out hate on all sides. It's really important.
Out there, if anybody has a question, one up here, Lori.
Yes, I thought what was really interesting about the film is how this guy, who probably, if he hadn't have gotten fired and wasn't saying these things, wouldn't have, it just shows how easy it is for someone who seems like a normal person to go off the deep end like that. And I thought that was a powerful message in the film. And the question I have is, do you see any corollaries between what is happening now, and which is so much easier to disseminate than it was in the times before World War II and the rise of Nazism? And you know, things like that would be in newspapers and flyers, and do you see corollaries? I'm just curious.
I think this is a great time for Tammy to use your expertise.
Yes. I mean, that's the short answer is yes. And we know what happens when hate goes unchecked. And that's part of what I'm sharing with you, is that it's out there. If you look for it even a little bit, your social media will be inundated with these types of messages. So hate unchecked takes us to a very bad place. And it's at a level that we've never seen before. I'm in my 15th year of doing this at ADL, and I have never seen it like this. So we all have a part in this, and we all have to stand up against this. And I just think this film is so powerful in sharing what you said, how a seemingly regular person can go down that rabbit hole.
I'm just going to add one quick addendum that obviously pre-World War II there was protocols about there's Zion, there was Henry Ford disseminating the International Jew, there were these texts. But now we have something called algorithms and Google search bubbles. And the more you look at something, the easier it is to find. So there is this added invisible hand of technology that is pushing people down these rabbit holes because it starts filtering their search results and giving them more and more extreme content. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that was as much of a problem 40 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. You know, the inside joke at the ADL is that when the internet started becoming popular, our director said, wow, this is going to be great because we can get so much great information out there about who we are and what we do. and we saw how that went not so well, so.
So this was a really exciting project for me in particular because I was very naive to all of this before high score. It's kind of convenient and easy to assume that these things happen only in the shadows or only on the fringe of society, but I think to kind of sum up this point here is that it's not, it's being pushed very much to the surface and in the mainstream of everything that we consume. And even kind of a small tidbit in there, if you noticed, our main character was curating his own feeds, right? He was deleting things that he didn't want to hear from people who he deemed not his friends. So if you're made aware of that, you can kind of make choices in your life to let the truth in and push away clearly what is not the truth.
Okay. Couple more questions, and then we're going to get to the next film. And, well, let's see, you may not be, but Serena and Ethan will be available in the Galleria after our last film for Space Taurus. So, Nancy, you've got a question, and then I think that may be the last one.
Thank you. This is certainly a powerful, disturbing movie. I don't know what else to say. Ethan, I'm directing this to you. How difficult was it for you to play this part?
I guess that's the scary part of the film. Like I said, when I was a kid, I was taught a bunch of racist things that I had to unlearn. And thankfully, I had segments of family and friends around me to give me love and support and to make my life go in a different direction. So the main preparation for playing the role of the film was, who would I be without all of that recorrecting, all of that love and all of that support. And the funny thing was that I put all those memories into my necklace.
Which is the Star of David.
Which is, yeah, Mom and David. And then before we start rolling, I would take off the necklace, and that would be representational of, like, so many of these people radicalized not only to white supremacy, but ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups are young, vulnerable people who are open to this type of group brainwashing. So while it was challenging, I would say that it's pretty quote-unquote easy to get into that headspace, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, hold your questions until after the next film. Hayley's leaving us soon. They'll be available, right?
Yes.
And also Tammy. I wanted to mention one more thing. Tammy is going to be speaking at Tapestry, which is here, what is the date?
October 23rd and 24th.
Okay, the October 23rd and 24th, so you can get tickets for that. It's a full day, 2 days, I guess, of speakers, and Tammy will be one of them talking, from ADL. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.